Hi there, folks. Welcome to the program. This, of course, is Stinchfield, the podcast. We got huge news to report. I mean, this would have never happened in the Biden administration, but Health and Human Services just canceled a $766 million Moderna contract, mRNA-based vaccine for the bird flu, which I think there's like, I think the number's like 40 people, maybe 70 people have been infected with the bird flu, which amounts to a farmer with some red eyes. $766 million canceled. Thank you, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Thank you to this new HHS. We're going to have Dr. Drew on the program today. It's great. Of course, the program is brought to you by the Wellness Company. I always remind you, if you don't have one of these kits, you are not prepared. So many of you out there are like me. We got food. We got water. We've got ammunition out the wazoo. I have thousands of rounds of ammunition. I also have prescription medications. There's ivermectin in here, amoxicillin. There's a Z-Pack. The most common antivirals, antiparasitics, antibiotics you're going to need to keep you and your family safe. Power outage, a natural disaster, God forbid a terrorist attack. You're going to want to have one of these on hand so you can get that speed of delivery into your body. How do you get there? twc.health/grant. Use the promo code GRANT for 10% off. And get one of those kits. The link, of course, is in the description as well. All right, with that, folks, let's get the show started, and we'll bring in Dr. Drew.
Uncensored and unapologetic. This is Stinchfield. Here's your host, Grant Stinchfield.
All right, welcome. Dr. Drew Pinsky, of course, is the man on your screen. Dr. Drew, it's great to have you back on the program.
It's good to see you, my friend. I love what you said about the Wellness Company. It really is about getting the power back into the hands of the patient. I mean, we have so adulterated this system. As opposed to spending $3,000 going to an urgent care, you can have for literally a 10% of that or 5% of that expense. You can have things in your hand with telehealth backup. It's amazing.
It really is amazing. In fact, my girlfriend just yesterday used it for her daughter. She thinks she was coming down with strep throat, so she started a course of antibiotics that was in the Wellness Company kit because of the guidebook. So really great stuff, and great stuff for you being associated with this company and the work they do at supporting not just my voice, but voices like mine around there, which is why I love this company, Dr. Drew.
Yeah, I agree. But as it pertains to the HHS, won't it be interesting to see, as you were talking about what they've done with the mRNA bird flu vaccine, won't it be interesting to see if the bird flu conversation stops? Once the money flowing into it stops, it'll be interesting to see if that is what's generating some of the energy around these nonsensical and non-ending media blitzes.
All right. So I was wondering, I've gotten to the point now, I think everything is an end run around common sense. Everything is some kind of operation they're working on us, always going back to the money. And I'm seeing this new variant of COVID. Well, then a few days after the headlines of the new variant of COVID, it comes out that the contract for the bird flu is canceled. You think they're connected, that they know the bird flu contract's going to get canceled, so now they got to come up with this new variant of COVID, or do we really need to be concerned about this?
I don't think those are connected. I'll tell you why. Because the new variant is such a failure of the booster. It's an abject failure. It's NB181, and it is around. It was detected in Los Angeles. I think I know clinically what NB181 looks like because it's different. There's two variants going around right now. One is just tremendous rhinorrhea, runny nose, but the other is really kind of nasty. That's the NB variant. And it's high fever and prostration, this kind of stuff. I've had several patients now take the vaccine within a week to a month of getting sick with both variants, with both. And so, as usual, the booster is for a variant that's been gone for 6 months. And so what are we doing? Plus, we know for sure the spike protein is the pathogenic mechanism of COVID, of long vax. Why are we not coming up with a whole virus or nucleocapsid alternative? This will kind of, I hope they start pushing that issue. The other thing is, they've taken these vaccines off the childhood schedule and the recommendations for pregnant women, even though the professional societies have doubled down on their recommendation, which I find I'm trying to reconcile. These are societies I have trusted my entire career. I don't think they're looking at the data. I just don't.
All right. You had, and I was watching one of your podcasts the other day with Naomi Wolf, who's been a great voice in all of this as well. You were specifically talking about decreasing birth rates. I know President Trump has talked about this. We know that miscarriages have gone up since the emergence of, I guess, the vaccine. I guess maybe you could blame it on COVID as well. You have to figure out what's causing these miscarriages. But it was a fascinating conversation. How concerned are you about declining birth rates, and what do you attribute it to?
I think it's multifactorial. I talked to Dr. Jordan Vaughn yesterday, and he had a very interesting mechanism of microvascular clotting. That he's a biochemical engineer. He understands these things, and he has worked these things out with an international team, and he has thousands of clinical observations to back this up. And if you think about microvasculature and clotting as the primary mechanism, both the vax and COVID, it makes sense that the placental fetal barrier could get interrupted. The placenta could be sort of impaired in terms of its connection to the uterine wall and the vasculature there. So there's a mechanism for all this, and it's both, right? And so if we really believe the vaccine did something, well, okay, but it doesn't seem to do something. So you're exposing young people who don't get serious illness to a vaccine that potentially causes the problem. So I'm very concerned about all this. So in terms of the birth rate, I interact a lot with young people. They're not dating. They're not sort of driven towards mating. No one talks about having families. They're beginning to. They're just starting again. But I think some of the social trends, it's happening internationally, to be fair, but I only can observe what's going on in this country. Some of the social, what we've done to men in particular, I think, has come to bear now, where they're just retreating to their caves and hanging out with other dudes.
Yeah, which certainly doesn't seem like fun to me.
No,
as the guy who, quite frankly, used to go around chasing women all the time until I have my very special lady friend now, and those days are over.
They don't do much of that because they're afraid of being called toxic. They're afraid of being accused of being a rapist. If you listen, I had a friend, an adult, not the 40, 50-year-old, who was kicked out of 2 different bars for buying a woman a drink.
You got to be kidding!
I mean,
me. So that's got to be in L.A., right? You live in L.A. That's
no, it's in New York. It's in New York.
All right,
it's in New York.
Same thing, I guess. New York, L.A., sister cities. That's ridiculous. I promise you, I'm in Dallas. That would not happen in Dallas. Good. And in fact, if you met a woman out, and I think if you asked her out without meeting someone online, they look at that as the biggest feat that they met a man, not online, not on a dating site. They would think that would be the coolest thing. I bet you they're longing for a guy to buy them a drink.
Yeah. Well, good. And I do think that's probably true because things are getting better. And particularly the millennials are starting to wake up from their confusion and slumber, and it's good to see.
You posted on your Twitter an article, which this reminds me of, about young men and what they call incels and the incel culture, and that is involuntarily celibate. What is the incel culture? Because there's worry about that it leads to violence and things like that. Nobody wants to be involuntarily celibate, I can tell you that much, but I guess this is a growing trend among young men.
I wouldn't say it was growing. In fact, I think it's shrinking, but it's around. And what I did was I reposted an article by Rob Henderson, who's a guy, you should read his book. It's called Troubled. You got to have him on here. He'll come on. Yeah. And he is now a Cambridge trained PhD social psychologist. He started as a deviant. He started as a kid that was in trouble because of he writes about it in his book, all kinds of horrible family problems. He was in the system. He was in foster care, just a mess. And he got his way into the military. That gave him some purpose and structure. Then he was able to use the military, the veterans' bills to get into Yale. He was shocked at how the students there were talking about people like him, of which they had no knowledge, as though they were experts on him and his life. And when he tried to educate them on what it's really like and what we really need if you're in those circumstances, you're a racist, you're whatever, you're far right, shut up, etc. He went to Cambridge, became a social psychologist, and he was evaluating the movie Adolescent. It's on Netflix, and it is about incels. If I'm getting all this, if I'm remembering all this correctly, and he was saying that they kind of got it wrong. That it's really, the data suggests these are not violent people. These are depressed young men who would happily socialize if they felt they could. They just have various kinds of social anxieties or autism or things that make them feel helpless, hopeless, and unable to ever think that they could have a female companion. And one of them, if you remember, shot up part of the sorority district in UC Santa Barbara like 14 years ago or something, or 12 years ago. And that kid had severe chronic mental illness. You just don't see that with the kids that are depressed and would like to socialize.
Do you see the increase in violence that I see, at least anecdotally, among the trans community? I'm always shocked that it seems like a lot more violence now is coming out with members of the trans community.
That data, I've seen that data, and that seems to be accurate. Now, the way it gets processed and presented through the media is, well, of course they're violent. They're so severely marginalized. So,
yeah, or you're just mentally ill and frustrated where you are, and literally depression takes over. I don't know if it's marginalized by the media, but
I'll tell you what, it's something that Adam and I were having a conversation a couple of days ago, and somebody in his team posted it on Instagram, and it kind of went viral. And he was saying, we have done people a disservice by telling them, don't let anybody tell you to do anything. You act out whatever your feelings are. In fact, there's a couple aspects of this. How we got into this conversation. So he's saying, look, people need to contain their impulses, not unleash them on the world. That is a extremely dysfunctional sort of recommendation, and it's not good for the people you're telling that to, because it's not going to go well. You need to contain your impulses. You need to participate in the world. You need to be empathic for other people. But I saw a really interesting interview that Michael Schellenberger did with a astrophysicist with formal psychological training, who has said, and I agree with this contract, he said, look, we've gone through three major sort of global characterological shifts through the human history. Initially, the psychotic construct. If you heard voices, if you saw angels, if God spoke to you, you were elevated. You weren't sent to a psychiatric hospital. You could start a religion if you wanted to, or be, but anyway, I'm not judging any of it. Then individualism kicked in, and the age of narcissism kicked in. Mm-hmm. And he said, I think for the last 10 years, we've been entering the age of the borderline. And I thought, oh man, I saw that happen in real time. Back when I was first working in a psychiatric hospital in the late 80s, I watched the diagnoses on the character sheet, which include, dependent personality and narcissistic personality and obsessive compulsive personality. And when I first got there were all kinds of different personalities. By the time we entered the 90s, all the women were borderline, and the men were all trending towards narcissists.
And when
sociopath.
you say borderline, is that borderline personality disorder?
Yes.
What
in the hospital,
does that mean?
It's a construct where there's a lot of deep sense of lack of clear identity. So I'm not sure who I am. I have trouble engaging in the world. Emotional dysregulation, like my emotions that overcome me all the time. But here's the part that he was zeroing in on that I agree with, that they predominantly they head towards hysteria. Sound familiar? We've been in hysterics. That's mass formation. Right. And they use a mechanism called projective identification to regulate their emotions, which is their emotions have to go out into you. And that's it. Then they're done. That's the totality of they don't. It's contrary to the very foundation of American pragmatism. He said, look, narcissism, if you had unregulated narcissistic rage, you'd pick up a gun and you join the army, you go to war. Mm-hmm. With the borderline construct, you go out with a megaphone and scream at people. Now you're done. You're done. That's satiating.
I'm not trying to be smart here in a wisecrack attitude, but why do I feel like what you're describing is what I see from so many liberals who go and protest? And when I look at conservative protests, it is not the same thing. They're yelling and screaming at people. They're in their faces. They're borderline violent. They're usually destroying something. And conservatives just don't do that. Now, I know some loud, emotional conservatives. But by and large, what you're explaining to me is what I see from these, pink-haired freaks that are taken to the streets.
Well, I mean, just think about it. Oh, my God, I care so much about people who are in need. Do you go donate? Do you give them your money? Do you work for them? I thought of it with the Bidens, with the prostate cancer observation. Look, Black men have a terrible problem with prostate cancer. Why didn't he use this as an opportunity to talk about that? Why didn't Jill do that? We should be telling Black men to get screened because they present with more advanced disease and higher grade disease. We have to get at that. Zero, nothing. They don't care, but they want to express how much they care. And you do this, it's all performative. And as opposed to what America's always been, which is pragmatic and get work done and build the bridges. And be careful, though. I mean, yes, I agree with you that that dichotomy existed, but didn't everybody just get whipped into a hysteria? Yeah. So to some extent, everybody, except for the maybe 10 or 20% of us that raised our hand and went, hey, something's wrong, right? There was 10 or 20% of us that didn't fall for the mass formation. But everybody else, pay attention because you may have some of that proclivity.
All right. And I would imagine those people rarely see it in themselves, though. That's got to be part of the problem. A narcissist doesn't know he's a narcissist, do they?
No, real narcissists don't, and real. But these are tendencies. We're talking. These are sort of character trends within the sort of general population. And a real narcissist believes that the problem is out there, not in here. A real borderline, oh, for sure, they're that way too.
Why is it that, back to this whole dating scene, why is it that when I talk to women, almost any age spectrum, everyone will call their ex-boyfriend or ex-husband a narcissist? Every single one. I don't think I've met anybody that said their ex-boyfriend or ex-husband wasn't a narcissist.
Well, we have over-pathologized and over-psychologized and over-labeled, and that's been the most convenient label of the day. And in fact, there has been a narcissistic trend, right? We are just exiting the narcissistic era into the borderline era. And most of us are still with our narcissistic traits. And, to some extent you can, when people get stressed, that's when these weakness, I don't call them weaknesses, these characteristics tend to jump in. And, they may be right, they may be wrong. They may be the narcissist. Look, the one thing that narcissists always do is they accuse you of exactly what they're doing. I heard a psychoanalyst once say, whenever a narcissist, like a Democrat. That's also, that's the narcissistic stuff. And you see lots and lots and lots of evidence of that. But I heard a psychoanalyst once say, whenever a narcissist says you are, what you need to hear is, I am.
That's fascinating. So what are some of the real traits of a narcissist if someone was to be on the lookout for someone they're close?
So let's again, I worry about the over labeling and the over whatever. I don't have a pejorative attachment to any of these labels. They're just descriptive to me. They're grouping people in ways that I can understand what's going on and what that means. There's not a good or a bad. Listen, if you want a great fighter pilot, you want a narcissistic alcoholic. They are fantastic in battle. They're the best. Not drinking, but before they start drinking, that's whom you want. Somebody who feels indestructible, who believes the other guy's the problem, and who gets off on extreme circumstances. So please don't judge people. That's why these things persist in our population. But they can be unpleasant to deal with when they become extreme. And the big liability in narcissism is what's called empathic failure, where you lose the ability to appreciate other people's feelings, narcissistic rage. The empathic failure is the big one. That's where, I can't remember what the other liability was in narcissism.
Do you believe you're entitled to everything? Like you deserve it?
There's an entitled narcissist, but there are also covert narcissists that convert everything over to the other person and focus on them. It's still kind of narcissism. But yes, there are grandiose, entitled narcissists. There's different flavors of narcissism.
Interesting. What? Just totally self awareness here. Some people will say, "Boy, Grant, you're so arrogant. You're cocky on the radio or whatever." I play somewhat of an extreme character of myself on the radio because I find it somewhat entertaining. I grew up listening to Howard Stern. Now, I'm not a Howard Stern fan right now. I think he's gone totally off the deep end, but he used to run a pretty entertaining show, and he was very honest, but he was also very cocky, and I thought that could be funny. So I do that. But the other side to me is I'm ultra grateful for what I have, and sometimes I am shocked that I have it and feel a case like maybe I don't deserve this. And where that was the case with me was really at Newsmax when I was there, and I got fired from Newsmax because I wouldn't quite agree with some of the things they wanted me to do. But I always felt like this is my dream job. I can't believe I have this job. And that's always been my problem. My sister would tell me, you have to believe it more. You have to want it more. You have to think like you're going, and you've heard this, The Secret and all this stuff. So I don't know where that falls in on a spectrum or how I improve that.
I can't necessarily slot it right into a specific spot, except to say that when you can't fully, I actually like that quality in people, and it tends to add to gratitude, right? I have the exact same thing. It goes to self-esteem to some extent. I have low self-esteem, and low self-esteem is an asset. It keeps me working hard. It makes me check everything. It makes me doubt myself. So it works, particularly as a physician. But in terms of being able to fully appreciate your accomplishments and to sort of allow that in, usually there's kind of like some childhood injury blocking that. Mom stuff, typically. And I definitely had a huge dose of that. And so there it is. And so it's something you have to kind of work on, and gratitude is where you'll find that.
All right. So when you say you have low self-esteem, you're Dr. Drew. Most people my age know exactly who you are and have great success. Do you know that you're good at what you do? I feel like I do a pretty good show. I feel like I know I'm pretty good at what I do. But I also know, hey, I could constantly be improving because right around the corner, somebody's going to take my spot, right?
There's that, but there's also, because I have low self-esteem, I'm always assuming I can do better because if I can do it, this is easy. Somebody else, if I can do it, certainly anybody can do it. So I better really pay attention and do a better job. It's sort of a weird look. Self-esteem gets set by age 5, and it's either positive or negative. And too high self-esteem is a serious liability. We've done a bad job. The whole self-esteem movement has been sort of a failure.
Yeah, it sure is. And there has been.
And by the way, Grant, it goes in with the whole safe space thing too, because we now know that, and this is sort of the same topic, that the way to build competency, self-efficacy, self-regulation is to lean into stress, expose yourself to things. I thought about my training as a physician. I jumped into everything. And because I jumped into everything, I learned how to do everything comfortably, easily. And I knew I had competence in all situations. And I could have just hit in a safe space, which is pathetic and would have been a major blow to my development.
So maybe it's not fair to say you don't have self-confidence or as much self-confidence because you were jumping in every, and I did that too. I wanted the ball when I was playing sports. I wanted to be the lead story when I was in mainstream television. I wanted all of the positions where I could, improve either my company or my broadcast or whatever. It sounds like you were the exact same thing. You can't have low self-esteem to actually want the ball.
No, you can. There's a difference between confidence and low self-esteem, or competence and you're needing all that because you have to feed the lack of esteem. So
maybe you just nailed it for me. That actually sounds actually like it hit the nail right on the head. Maybe that is why you want the ball, because you want all that. And
it's where workaholism comes from in me, for sure. and I could never be good enough. It was always, I had to be better.
Fascinating stuff. All right, let me do a little work here for the wellness company. I'm going to show you. Have you seen this? This is the field kit. Do you have
I love
one?
that. I've got one sitting right over here across the room from me.
So
we crack that one open frequently.
So it's fabulous to that's yours.
It's got everything.
Let me do
everything.
This. It's got everything in here. I'll open it up. There's an EpiPen in here too, and I think every household should have an EpiPen, especially if you have kids. You don't know who's allergic to what.
I agree with you, and we sourced those pens, or the CEO went to great lengths to make that an affordable pen, and he did a great job.
Yeah, it's fabulous. I mean, there's steroids are in here. You've got the same slew of antibiotics in the smaller kit, antiparasitics, ivermectin. I mean, overall, this is a fabulous kit. I mean, if you need a bug out and you got to get out of town, I would take it that this would be the kit.
Yep, I agree. No, that's the one. It's got everything. We were in Europe a couple weeks ago, and we brought 2 travel kits. Both my wife and I grabbed one. Like, we can't forget this. And we ended up having 2 of them.
And the website is twc.health/grant. Use the promo code GRANT for 10% off. twc.health/grant. Use that promo code GRANT. All right, before I let you go, I'm going to play one clip for you. You had posted this on your Twitter. This is a, you know what? I'm going to fast forward a little bit through it because she gets a little bit forward here. This is a surgeon who quit her job. She was basically fed up with the way the industry was going, the medical industry was going. Let me play this.
Their insurance company would deny it, and the pharmacy would tell them it would cost them $300. And I couldn't tell which patients had the insurance that would do that and which ones didn't. That's just one tiny little example, but multiply that by thousands and thousands of encounters, of interactions, of trying to either prescribe a medication or prescribe a treatment plan or do a surgery, and to just be met with roadblocks and layers of bureaucracy that are quote unquote meant to keep, healthcare costs down or a patient safe, but really don't. They just drive a wedge, multiple wedges between the physician and the patient. And when we keep layering in these roadblocks, preventing the doctor and the patient from having an actual relationship, that's when we make mistakes. And so how do we fix this? We got to get business out of medicine. Healthcare needs to go back to relationship building, to trust between the physician and the patient. They need to be put on the pedestal. We need to start there, not with the shareholders, not with all of the bureaucratic tasks that are meant to keep patients safe, but just increase costs.
All right, what do you think of her comments there?
Well, I mean, she couldn't be more spot on. And of course, I've got layers and layers to say about this. One is we have to train more physicians like her that can think autonomously and be professional and really put the patient first. We've lost track of that. The reason I'm in the wellness company is precisely because of what she said. I've decided, for the time being, we can't fight this fight. We got to just get things to the patient. That's the best we can do. And then, like she said, eventually restore the physician-patient. Let me show you how pernicious this works. It's the worst in psychiatry. So I was working in medicine and psychiatry at the same time. I was doing ICU care, hospital care, outpatient medicine, and then psychiatric care and addiction medicine. On the addiction side, it was always the most egregious. A patient would come in really polydiagnosed, seizing, out of their mind, in withdrawal, feeling terrible, maybe liver, multiple. We got the sickest of the sick, multiple medical problems, multiple psychiatric problems. And the insurance company on day 2 would say, we want a doctor-to-doctor review, which means we want the patient out, because they will then send me to a doctor who will listen to nothing that I say, who starts spouting their criteria for continued hospitalization that has nothing to do with the clinical reality of what I'm seeing in front of me. And by the way, a patient like that typically requires weeks and weeks of care. And so I went to great lengths to develop levels of care, inexpensive care. I mean, we really could do it very inexpensively. Still, the insurance company came in. So the patient freaks out, calls the insurance company, and the insurance company says, Well, of course, Mrs. Smith, if Dr. Pinsky would just tell us what you need, we would give it to them. What they don't tell the patient is we set the criteria and you, young lady, don't meet our criteria, arbitrary criteria that are poorly, not based in any real meaningful science, just things that are sort of constructed by the insurance company. So the patient comes back to me and I say, I did tell them your situation. It is egregious. You don't meet their criteria. I'm sorry, but they're going to cut you off tomorrow. And now your expenses are going to be $800 a day. You're a drug addict. You don't have that.
Right.
Let me try to, you got to hear how this goes. And let me try to find some level of care for you. We place them somewhere. So I complained. I complained to the insurance company that this is inappropriate, that this patient was sick. She's, now God knows, must be back on heroin or whatever, or maybe some suicidality. Sorry. You don't. So I then complained to the state of California, the insurance commissioner. I get a call then from the hospital I work at, freaking out because the insurance company said, we're going to decommission the entire hospital because Dr. Pinsky doesn't approve of our business practices. Think how far they go to have their way. It's crazy. It's crazy. And let's say that patient goes home and kills himself. They go, we don't practice medicine. There's Dr. Pinsky's signature right there on the discharge order. He discharged the patient.
Wow.
We didn't do anything. That's the game. It's disgusting. And that young surgeon was just getting into how egregious this whole situation is.
Does the hospital end up firing a guy like you then to just shut up?
Oh, of course they would. Of course they would. So I had to back down and just kind of deal with all this. I had a guy who was an excellent physician, used to be, who ended up being an HMO administrator. He owned an HMO. And he called me one day. His patients were like coming through my facility. And I go, dude, you name your price. Let me keep these patients in the hospital for a couple of weeks. I'll use my team. You name the price. It's just you're demoralizing everybody, sending them out after 3 days, and they're coming back drunk again. This was alcoholics in particular. Okay. And he goes, no, I just want a 3-day detox. And I go, that's ridiculous. It's not going to help this guy. And he goes, yeah, but if they go out and drink and they do that 3 times, then they're no longer my concern. And he said, I'm an insurance administrator now, not a social agency, so I can't tell you whether that's good or bad. I swear to God, those were his words. I'll never forget them.
Do you think they've gotten to the point where they've got it? This is all about saving money, right? So they're not, because they've been mandated to spend money on so many other things that they shouldn't have to be spending money on?
That and, like a 60% goes into a bond fund right away. I mean, very little of your healthcare dollars go to your healthcare, and even less go to the physicians. And we have to fight for it. We have to hire people to go fight for it. It's just pathetic. It just is not how to run a system.
Really is broken. It needs to be fixed. I guess we could probably do hours and hours of a podcast trying to do that. But I know you're a busy guy. I always love our conversations. I never quite know where they're going to lead. So I was analyzed today by Dr. Drew and didn't even
old radio guys. You put 2 old radio guys together, you have no telling where it'll go.
That's exactly right. Dr. Drew Pinsky, it's always great having you on. Why don't you tell people where they can find you on social media?
Twitter at Dr. Drew, Instagram at Dr. Drew Pinsky. But I really want your listeners and viewers to go to my streaming show. It's 2:00 generally, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 2:00 Pacific time. We interview everybody. I've just had Bhattacharya and RFK and all the controversial folks. I go after them because I want to hear what they have to say. And I've learned something from every one of them.
Well, it's great. And I know you put those up on Twitter as well. You can watch them. So, I urge people to do that as well. Dr. Drew, it's always great having you on. I appreciate you, and have a great weekend.
You too. See you soon.
All right, thanks. And folks, don't forget these wellness company kits that are absolutely fabulous. You got this one, Wellness Company. I urge everyone to have one. And then, of course, there is the Field Kit, which is great. That's another version. So twc.health/voice. Excuse me. Not /voice. That's my other show. twc.health/grant. All right. Very important. twc.health/grant. Use the promo code GRANT for 10% off. Folks, it's great having you on. We will talk again soon. I'll see you on the Real America's Voice show tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Stinchfield's Army rolls. We'll see you soon.